All right, so let's go to the Halloween 2022 press conference regarding this latest arrest and what it means in the entire scope of the case. Because many people were just quick to jump on the bandwagon that Richard Allen is responsible, Richard Allen acted alone, and police would not have arrested him if they hadn't definitively known that he was not only Bridge Guy but the murderer, and of course many conflicting statements throughout the years revolving around all of this. And again, the Dunning-Kruger crowd, for whatever reason, they think that Richard Allen couldn't have done anything other than act alone, or that it's definitively him. It's just really, really bizarre. So let's examine the press conference here.
Good morning. My name is Sergeant Jeremy Piers, Public Information Officer for the Indiana State Police Lafayette Post. I'd like to thank you all for being here and thank the Delphi United Methodist Church for allowing us to use their facility. This morning we're going to provide an update on the investigation into the murders of Abigail Williams and Liberty German.
Is it common for police, again, for people that are well-versed in press conferences, is it common in either major or non-major cases for police to hold a press conference in a church on Halloween? See, a lot of people chastise so-called conspiracy theorists who believe that there's some kind of satanic link or undertone through involving law enforcement and government corruption. But if there were, is this the type of thing that corrupt law enforcement involved in satanic Illuminati rituals and trafficking, is this something they would get a kick out of? Holding a press conference in a church on Halloween, a celebration of all things horror, demonic, and satanic, and paranormal and otherwise. I'm just saying, I'm not saying, obviously this is MINDSHOCK, I'm not claiming anything is true or untrue, but if, I know a lot of people have trouble with the word if, the comment section is littered with Dunning-Kruger goofs who don't understand what the word if means, don't understand what asking questions are. I mean, if there is some kind of widespread satanic conspiracy of corruption, would they get a kick out of holding a press conference in a church on Halloween? But continuing on here.
Before we get started, I'm going to introduce to you our speakers, Superintendent of the Indiana State Police, Doug Carter, the Carroll County Sheriff, Tobe Lesenby, and the Carroll County Prosecutor, Nick McClelland. I'd like to remind everyone that this continues to be an active and ongoing investigation. At the conclusion of this press conference, we are going to answer a limited amount of questions out of respect to the investigation and the process that will follow today. We will not discuss evidence that is related to this investigation. On behalf of the Delphi Double Homicide Task Force, thank you all for your continued support. I would now like to introduce to you our first speaker, Superintendent of the Indiana State Police, Doug Carter.
Give me just a second here. Seldom do I have prepared remarks, but today is different because I do not want there to be any confusion or ambiguity with what I will say. Today is not a day to celebrate, but the arrest of Richard M. Allen of Delphi on 2 counts of murder is sure a major step in leading to the conclusion of this long-term and complex investigation.
So right off the bat, he said he doesn't want to be vague. I mean, it's a step in a complex investigation. So it's not, is he basically saying here, it's simply not over? Is he doing everything possible to say that there's more than one individual involved without explicitly saying it, while saying he wants to avoid any ambiguity? I mean, this is weird. And if it really was just one guy, I mean, why would it be that complex? I mean...
First, I'd like to speak directly to Anna, Mike, Becky, Kelsey, your extended families, along with the entire Delphi community that certainly has grown and now includes our nation and even many countries around the world. I am proud to report to you that today, actually last Friday, was the day.
All right, so let's keep all this in mind. He's saying today or last Friday, when the arrest was made, was the day. Today was the day. Today's the day. The Friday was the day. The day has happened. So again, he opened with wanting to avoid any ambiguity or vagueness. Now he's stating, in no uncertain terms, that the day has transpired, whether it's the press conference on Halloween or 3 days prior of the Friday. The day has happened. That's what he's saying here. Let's continue.
And an arrest has been made. Thanks to literally hundreds of media outlets that have been steadfast in reporting and keeping the memories of Abby and Libby front and center. Many of you in the room have developed relationships with me personally, and you know I always have a personal perspective, and today's no different. But from a very personal perspective, you all have provided inspiration and support, even while oftentimes frustrated with us and me. You continue to encourage the efforts, and you too believe that one day we would all be here participating and sharing this news. To the entire law enforcement community, which includes all local, state, and federal agencies, which are far too many to specifically mention today, thank you, thank you, thank you. We are going to continue a very methodical and committed approach to ensure that if any other person had any involvement in these murders in any way, that person or persons will be held accountable.
So another very clear statement here. That other person, so if this really was just one guy and they believe it was just one guy, why would he go out of his way here and talk about other persons being involved in any way? So in any way, what does that mean? Either theoretically, physically involved in the actual murders, or simply assisting, luring, aiding and abetting, covering up, whatever. So is it really not that simple that Richard Allen acted alone? Because if it was that simple that Richard Allen acted alone, why would Doug Carter be making these statements? And let's not forget his opening. He wants to avoid being ambiguous or vague or whatever. So he's very clear, and look at the intensity on his face when saying that. He wants to get the message out that other individuals that could possibly be involved will also be held accountable. That's very interesting that he's specifically making time and focusing on this.
Since the murders of Abby and Libby, 2,086 days ago, the daily investigative team has worked tirelessly and is certainly worthy of mention today. Specifically, Sheriff Linsonby, the Sheriff of Carroll County, Detectives Tony Liggett, Detective retired Kevin Hammond, former Delphi Chief and now the prosecutor's investigator Steve Mullins, State Police First Sergeant Jerry Holman, Detectives Jay Harper, Dave Vito, and Brian Harshman, along with members of the United States Marshal Service, specifically Agent Jeremy Clinton and Agent Bill Colfers. With them today is Dan McClain, the U.S. Marshal, appointed U.S. Marshal. Our state police analyst, our scientist from many different disciplines within our laboratory division, Mrs. Kathy Shank, for your incredible dedication to detail, and to so many others that I know I've missed. I really believe that Abby and Libby would be proud of you for standing strong, even in the face of immense pressure and perpetual criticism. Some of these individuals have postponed retirement, passed on promotional opportunity, have dedicated personal time away from their families, given up nights, weekends, and holidays, all while in the pursuit of accountability for Abby and Libby. I know that today's announcement will not diminish your resolve, and I hope you have found just a bit of peace in this most complicated world. This is really important. While I know you are all expecting final details today concerning this arrest, today is not that day. Today is not that day.
So he opens up with wanting to avoid ambiguity. Today's the day, and now today is not that day. Now, obviously, he's talking about the exact details and nature of the arrest, but what's weird, though, in other cases, again, just looking at other cases, there's a certain amount of celebration, we got the guy, etc., etc. I mean, obviously, it's not over, we still have work to do, etc., but there's a celebratory nature, and he's doing everything he can here to downplay it, talk about other involved individuals. Again, compare this to other cases where a murderer is caught either by DNA match or otherwise, and it's relatively definitive. Their press conference, arrest, on these particular charges, we believe, so it's very, very different than what we see here. There's not all this focus on accomplices and other people involved. There's just a celebration of they finally got this guy. And a case this high profile, going this long, it's very curious on what Doug Carter chose to focus on and the way he chose to word all of this. I mean, it's just very, very interesting. And you can compare this to other press conferences, other cases, most probably not held on Halloween in churches. But in other cases, there's just like, okay, we finally did it. We got the guy, etc., etc. Here, it's like, oh, today's not that day. Today is the day, then it's not the day. Other people involved need to be held accountable. I mean, it's all very, very curious.
This investigation is far from complete, and we will not jeopardize its integrity by releasing or discussing documents or information before the appropriate time.
And if he had just stated just that, without all this focus on other potential parties involved, without explicitly stating, today is not that day. I mean, today is the day. I mean, that's kind of been the catchphrase of this whole case. Today's the day for finally arrest. So for him to choose the words, today is not that day, and then repeat it again, I mean, that's a kind of a weird message Doug Carter is saying, because all these people that want justice for these poor girls, they've been stating and repeating today's that day. I mean, that's been the tagline, the catchphrase. And for him to use the opposite, today's not that day, even though someone is arrested for this, now, it's just weird. If he had just made the statement he just made, where, we're not going to compromise the case by releasing all these details, that would be perfectly fine. They do that in other, I mean, that's normal. That's par for the course. You don't want to compromise a case. And if he had just said that without all this focus on other people possibly being involved and explicitly stating today is not that day twice for emphasis, I mean, it's kind of weird in this press conference at a church on Halloween. It's kind of weird.
Prosecutor Nick McClellan, of course, will share additional information about what we can and cannot say, and also explain to you why the probable cause affidavit is temporarily sealed by the court and not available. And by the way, he has been a tremendous, tremendous asset to this team.
That's also another curiosity. Usually these are not sealed. By law, do they have to be released within 24 hours or something of that nature? But for whatever reason, in this case, it's not. I mean, there's a lot of anomalies here. I mean, that much cannot be denied. Regardless of what the real truth is, the anomaly stack here is very, very extensive.
I'm yet again asking you for your patience and please your understanding while our system of due process works. Also remember that all persons arrested are presumed innocent. All persons arrested are presumed innocent. You all will have an innate desire to subjectively interpret and then report what you think. We in the law enforcement realm cannot, and you should never allow us to, talk about what we think concerning facts, but rather discuss and share at the right time what it is we know.
I mean, again, I just can't help but notice how different Doug Carter's statements are and all these press conferences are compared to just about any other case. I mean, just what is chosen to be emphasized. I mean, it's just really weird.
The time will come when additional details can be released. But again, today is not that day. It's about Abby and Libby, their families, and this community, this nation, and even our planet.
What? Our planet? Why is he roping in the planet? I mean, I don't know. This is really weird. This is really weird. And again, he's saying today is not that day. After all these years about hoping for an arrest, I mean, today's the day. I mean, that's for justice to be called for. I mean, to say that it already was. I mean, if he didn't already say it already was with that Friday, he could have clarified and said the day is going to be in court when the true murderer is convicted. And that's perfectly fine. Then don't open with today's the day. Because all this time, if today is the day was talking about like a major arrest, then it was the day. Then why take that away? Again, none of this makes any logical sense. It's really weird.
The prosecutor has been very clear with law enforcement about what his expectations are, about what can and cannot be released, shared, or discussed. So we will, of course, comply. If you choose to be critical of our silence, be critical of me.
It's not so much the silence, though. It's what's chosen to be talked about and the manner in which it is talked about. I mean, I don't know. It's all quite weird.
Not the front line. These are the folks that have committed their entire lives to a successful conclusion. In other words, a guilty verdict. As we move to the next phase of this investigation, I will continue to offer all resources that the ISP has to not only the investigative team that I anticipate growing, but also to Prosecutor McClellan as we prepare for the coming months. Again, Nick has been very resolute and very clear, and I'm most grateful for his leadership. And it's going to be really important as we move forward. Please continue offering tips that you would like to share. The many avenues to report will remain open and will be available to all. Please continue doing that. In closing, I stand before you in this church and very place where we held our first briefing nearly 6 years ago, and just hours after the murders of Abby and Libby. Right here.
I do have to say, that is a pretty decent explanation if they wanted to hold the press conference in the exact same place. I mean, that still doesn't explain why Halloween specifically, because they could have theoretically had the press conference Friday or the Tuesday. But Monday on Halloween, I mean, it goes a little bit in the way of explaining it, because if every other press conference was not at a church, and then this one was, I mean, that'd be a lot more damning, no doubt. No doubt. But yeah, still unanswered questions.
Pulling in today, I wasn't really sure what emotion I would experience. But peace came over me. And I didn't expect that to happen. And I hope all of you, with all the different responsibilities you have from around the planet today, have felt some of that as well.
How many people are there from out of state, let alone out of country, yet alone out of continent? I mean, I don't know. I mean, how much peace can honestly be felt, though, when he's talking about all these potentially other involved individuals? I mean, I don't know.
But remember, we're not done. I think what we all have experienced proves that together there's nothing we cannot do. But more importantly, giving of ourselves, all of us, giving of ourselves matters more than what we could ever receive. Abby and Libby, though in death, have had a profound effect on so many of us, on how we live, and as importantly, who we all should be. I would now like to introduce to you my friend and the Carroll County Sheriff, Tom Lazenby, for his remarks. Sheriff.
I believe in a God of justice and righteousness. Today, I believe that same God has provided us with justice for Abby and Libby.
Okay, so now we have a notably different statement here from Toby Lazenby. He's saying God has provided justice. I mean, that's a lot different statement than everything Doug Carter is saying. We're not finished. Today's not the day. Other people need to be held accountable. Here we have Toby Lazenby just flat out saying justice. Today, justice. I mean, that's interesting. That's very interesting, particularly for those that think Lazenby is still involved somehow.
As Sheriff of Carroll County, Indiana, I want to publicly and sincerely thank each individual who played a role in helping us during this 5.5-year investigation.
That's also kind of curious because he's stating that as if it's over. Weird.
Whether it was in an investigative capacity, providing tips, cards or letters of suggestions or encouragement, phone calls, and thousands of other countless ways of communicating. I earnestly thank those who prayed for this moment in time. We now move forward through the Indiana criminal justice system.
Now, again, saying you're moving through the system now, as opposed to trying to apprehend people, does that give the impression here that he's saying it's over and they got the guy, they're not focusing on accomplices? Again, vastly different statements and different tonality than Mr. Doug Carter.
Allowing the system to provide its due diligence and process in providing that justice which is owed Abby and Libby, their families, and this community. Thank you.
And again, I can't quite put my finger on it, but something seems off about Toby Lazenby as well. Whether it's just guilt for calling off that initial search, or because he knows far more than he's saying, or possibly he's involved in other kind of activities that don't have anything to do with this case, but there's some kind of guilt for whatever reason, or simply if he is a good guy, just simply the guilt of not being able to get this done quicker. But there's something off and lagging in the background regarding Mr. Lazenby here. And of course, this arrest comes right after a lawsuit, which I discussed in the previous episode. And also right before an election where a new sheriff is to be elected. I mean, is that all coincidental?
Welcome, everybody. My name is Nicholas McClellan. I'm the Carroll County Prosecutor, and before we get started, I want to reiterate some of the things that Sheriff Lazenby and Superintendent Carter stated. I first want to thank both of them. They've been a great support to my office throughout this investigation. They've always been there for a phone call and always been willing to help a hand or a line of assistance to me and my office during this investigation. I want to thank the team behind me. This is the Homicide Task Force team that we've put together. thank them and thank their families for being so understanding for the many nights they've worked away from their families, away from their children. There are many dates in a lifetime that you're going to remember. The date your children are born, the date you're married, the date you buy a first house, the date Abby and Libby went missing. One of those dates was last Friday, October 28, 2022. At that time, we had gathered evidence to formulate a PC that we submitted to the court, and the judge did find probable cause for an arrest of Richard Allen. He's been charged with 2 counts of murder for the murder of Abigail Williams and Liberty German.
Okay, so here is explicit confirmation, because early on, there were statements that he's being charged with 2 counts of murder, but again, some people were stating that it was unclear which murder. So now he's 2 counts. Now, the exact nature of the counts, I don't know if that's been released or anything further, but explicitly in these 2 murders of Abby and Libby. So that statement is explicit right here for those that were still waiting for something definitive.
This investigation is still very ongoing. We're keeping the tip line open, the tip email open. We encourage everybody to continue to call in tips, not only about Richard Allen, but about any other person that you may have.
Oh, that is also curious. So we have Leesenby talking about now it's time for due process in the justice system, and then you have Doug Carter and McClellan talking about other individuals and other investigation continuing and possibly arresting other individuals. I mean, this is really weird, just the nature of this conference and the vast difference between Leesenby, Carter, and McClellan here. McClellan and Carter seem to be on the same page. Leesenby talking about God serving justice and time for due process, whereas the other 2 not so much. Kind of the opposite. Talking about, continuing the investigation, and today not being the day. Weird.
For that reason and for the nature of this case, the probable cause and the charging information has been sealed by the court.
Again, would they have sealed it? Because if this is all open and shut, and there's no other individuals involved, like what's going on here? If it's already a slam dunk case, it's weird, because what did they find? They have probable cause for the arrest. They don't want to reveal exactly what that is. We'll be going into updated information here in a moment, but just, again, this is quite a unique press conference. That much can be said.
I've been very clear to everybody that per the court order, we cannot talk about the evidence that's in the probable cause or the evidence that's in the charging information. That will become evident to you at some point, and it'll be released, but right now is not that day. Today's about Abby and Libby, focusing on them. Mr. Allen has had his initial hearing. He's entered a preliminary plea of not guilty. The matter's been set for a pretrial on January 13th at 9 a.m., 2023, and a trial date of March 20th, 2023 at 9 a.m. He is presumed innocent. We will have an opportunity and day in court when we can present the evidence that we have against him. But until that day, he is presumed innocent. I want to open up to a few limited questions from the audience. But again, keep in mind, we are not going to talk about the evidence that we have in this case or about the charging information. We cannot. Those things have been sealed by the court. And so I want to open up a few questions.
Prosecutor, when did Richard Allen become a suspect, and do you think he acted alone?
Again, that's part of the investigation, so I'm not going to talk about those things. What I can say is that we have probable cause established by the court for his arrest, and he is in custody. He's being held currently without bond.
How long has he been a suspect?
I'm sorry?
Is Mr. Allen connected?
Again, that gets into the evidence we have of the investigation, and I know from everybody it's frustrating. I know everybody, not only reporters, but the family, everybody wants to know more information. I understand it's frustrating, but my goal is to maintain the integrity of this case.
Is there a degree that
Superintendent,
goes?
Superintendent Carter, you had said that you believe that you had spoken to the suspect or the suspect's family 2 years ago. Is this man one of those people?
Again, I appreciate the question, but we're getting into the timeline of events, and today's not the time to do that.
They keep reiterating today is not the day. Today's not the time. It's just kind of weird. They could have chosen to phrase that differently, considering that, again, the catchphrase of this whole case has been today's the day.
Can you talk about
can't imagine how emotional it is for everybody that's worked on his case. What was your conversation first like with the family, Matthew, when you were able to tell them you finally got the suspect?
It was a very personal moment for me, and I think it was a very personal moment for them, for all of us that have had interaction with the family. We developed a relationship that I think is going to last at least one lifetime, and maybe a second. So it was a very, very, very sad yet a very humbling experience.
Superintendent, you asked for tips, detective work, there was a reward for $325,000. Did this all come together to make this nexus? Is that the combination of all three things that led us to this day? Was it one or the other?
Well, eventually you'll be able to see what led us to this day, but again, today's not that day. To include the reward, you mentioned that, Raphael, about the reward itself.
How many times is he going to say today is not that day? I mean, what is going on here? Because there's a lot of ways to phrase this without kind of pointing and trying to undo today's the day. And yet Carter chooses these words repeatedly, today is not that day. I mean, it's just really weird. There's so many different ways you could phrase that.
And again, very premature for us to talk about that. There's still a tremendous amount of work to do.
What would you say that Abby and Libby have taught you in depth that we can remain to continue on with it?
I think probably resilience and understanding the value of each and every day. That today was the day, but I didn't anticipate they ever thought today would be their day. And I feel like I've known them for a long time.
Is somebody else involved in this case?
Excuse me?
Do you assume there's any other individuals involved in this case?
We haven't closed the door on the investigation, and so that's why we keep the tip line and the tip email open. And so we're not presuming anything at this point, but we're going to continue to take tips, continue to take any information anybody has, and as we've done with all the information we've gathered, we're going to look at that and examine that and see where it leads us.
Mr. Prosecutor, can you explain the law? You've asked the court, based on this investigation, that these documents should remain out of the public view. Can you explain, without getting into the details of what's in the documents, well, this is not regular. Usually a public hearing is held. We should be able to see all the documents, right?
Sure,
But
sure.
you made a decision. Can you explain your decision as to why you believe that over the next 30 days, no one in this room should have access to those records?
Sure, it is unusual. We don't do it very often in all the cases that we handle here in Carroll County. We did it in this case because the investigation is still open. And while all cases are important, the nature of this case has some extra scrutiny with it. And so my office, felt it was important to seal those records. There will be a public hearing on whether or not those records are going to remain sealed or not. There'll be public notice for that hearing so that everyone can attend, but there will be a hearing to determine whether or not they're going to stay sealed. But for now, to me, it's about protecting the integrity of this case. I want to have an opportunity at some point to have an opportunity in court to explain the evidence and for that not to be tarnished or tainted or anything like that. Again, he's presumed innocent, and so it was important for me in this case to do that. Hold on just a minute.
How did the clients fit into all this?
We're not going to comment on that right now as part of the investigation. Again, we just encourage everybody to continue to call in tips if they have them about anybody, and we'll examine those tips.
How does it feel for you guys to have searched nationwide for nearly 6 years, going all over the place, only to find your guy, down the street from your office?
That's a hard question to answer. It's a mixed emotions. I've been watching the news all weekend like everybody else has, and I think a lot of the members of the public said it right. It's bittersweet. It's a step in the right direction. It's concerning that he's a local guy. So I think just different emotions. Again, this is a step in the right direction. This is the first step into getting into court and having a trial. And so,
All right, so let's move on to this interview immediately after this press conference, and we'll see what Doug Carter reveals here.
Doug, talk about one thing that you said. You stood up there and you said you weren't sure what kind of emotions you were going to feel today.
Yeah.
And talk about that. You pulled up and what? It just hit you.
Well, I got up really early today, and I didn't really work all day yesterday, and in my mind about what was happening, and I just decided to take the long way here. And I was going to get here early, and I decided not to, so it was about a 2-cup trip, and I just disappeared into the rural areas of Delphi, from Delphi to my home. And it was a bit surreal. And then when I pulled into the parking lot, it was really surreal. And it was just peaceful. I just felt, yeah, it was weird. I didn't expect that.
You were visibly emotional up there. Can you talk about that? I mean, you've always said this was personal.
It is personal. It's personal to all of us. And to be able to participate and see the raw emotion, and to see the commitment and the dedication of not just from the state police, but from, I mean, the sheriff's office in this county has 12 deputies, I think. The city of Delphi is very small, but it's a wonderful, wonderful community. And just to see the level of commitment at a time when most people would have just walked away is very powerful to me as my career comes to an end. It's very powerful.
Are you confident this is your guy?
The judge signed the probable cause affidavit for the arrest of Richard Allen for 2 counts of murder. Yes.
Do you think there are other people involved?
I'm not going to go there.
There's still speculation out there that investigators should still continue to look, even though he's passed away, at Ron Logan, where the bodies were found.
We're going to keep doing what we've done until there's nothing left for us to do.
And again, another curiosity that he doesn't state here, yeah, Ron Logan's been ruled out. He says they're just going to continue investigating, and he doesn't want to go there. That's another interesting phrasing, because he could have easily said, I can't talk about the details of the investigation, but he chose to say, I'm not going to go there as far as other people involved. I mean, he's already made the statement regarding other individuals being held accountable, so clearly the door is open there. Clearly that's a possibility. He doesn't want to kind of reveal, oh, maybe, because maybe they are looking at a few other people. Maybe they know for sure, and they're just waiting for the evidence to pile up, just like against Allen, if they did have Allen on the radar. And maybe they knew for sure about Allen, or that he's one of the parties involved for a long time. So, just interesting statements. Again, not really like other cases.
We're going to keep doing it.
I was looking back at my old notes from I have notebooks for 5.5 years. So I was reading back on the time when you guys searched Mr. Logan's property, and Kim Riley, was it Kim's? And he was saying it was because some things didn't add up. Are we still looking at Mr. Logan as possibly involved?
At everything and all of it. We're looking at all of it. We said when this happened we were going to start all over.
So you never cleared him, Mr. Logan?
We haven't cleared anybody.
Whoa! Interesting statement there from Doug Carter. Nobody's been cleared, so none of the family members, none of the police officers, not Leesenby, not himself. I mean, they haven't cleared anybody? They haven't cleared anybody. Interesting. I mean, that's an interesting statement from Doug Carter. Because he could have said, oh, I can't talk about who we have and haven't cleared. That would have been a perfectly normal statement. Because, if you don't want to reveal any evidence, that's a normal statement for an officer to say, either no comment, even I don't want to go there. I mean, that's kind of a little bit weird, but still, that's fine. But to openly admit no one has been cleared, that's interesting. That's especially when you're holding a press conference on an arrest. So he's and again, remember how he opened the press conference talking about not wanting ambiguity or vagueness, and yet that's all he provides. But they haven't cleared anyone. So they arrested a guy who is charged with Abby's and Libby's murders. And at the same time, no one has been cleared. No one. I mean, those very explicit words. That means none of the other family members. That means none of the police officers. That would technically mean none of the FBI agents investigating, none of the judges, none of the prosecutors. I mean, he said he hasn't cleared anyone. Anyone. I mean, that's crazy. That's mind-shocking. And that was an instant response with a straight face and intensity. Unlike his other interviews, you don't see him stumbling, thumbing his nose, rubbing his head, getting twitchy. That was one of the few times that he just looks straight at her, gives a definitive comment with none of this body language or micro-expression, funny business. That's very interesting.
Talk about the decision to keep the PC closed.
Well, that's a part of this entire process. This is not a typical, usual homicide investigation. I mean, they all matter. But this one is different. And Nick McClellan, the prosecutor here, has been a really good partner and made the decision to attempt to do that, and the judge agreed. So that's all I'm going to say about it.
Can you talk about what brought you to Mr. Allen?
No, I can't.
Can you talk about if he's related to Kevin Klein in any way?
Talk about any of the facts associated with the case. Emily, I can't.
And again, he could have said, I can't talk about it when asked about anybody being cleared or around, but he chose to openly admit directly that no one has been cleared.
The Patties confirmed to us that at one point Mr. Allen processed some photos for them at the local CVS and didn't make them pay for them. They there was a rumor out there, and they said, "Yep, that happened." Did you know that happened?
I didn't.
Okay, that's a little weird. This kind of major detail. So either he's lying, but again, I've analyzed the body language and microexpressions of Doug Carter in the past in other interviews. You can go check on those. Here, notice he's being very direct, looking her dead in the eye without any of the twitchy funny business. So either he's just flat out dead lying, or he's flat out telling the truth without any of this back and forth ambiguity of choosing to reveal details, which he does in interviews a lot as well. So he doesn't even know that this guy processed the photos for the family and didn't charge the family. How does he not know that? I mean, does that alarm anybody?
You always said, I mean, gosh, in every press conference when you brought out the video and the audio, and you addressed the killer several times and said, if you're here, do we know if he was ever in any of those rooms when you talked? Are you going back and looking at video or trying to see?
We're going to do everything we can possibly do.
The command center, that's long been closed, but are we going to reestablish a new command center
There's one
now?
there now. We moved from the big facility back to the city building and now to another facility near the square in downtown Delphi.
And so is that about to get even busier now?
We'll give them any resource they want. I'm not going to get involved in the production of a process from an investigative standpoint, but there will be no questions as to why. If they ask for a resource, they'll get it.
Who's the lead investigator, though, on this? Is it Carroll County? Is it you guys? Is
Yes.
it everybody?
Yes, it's a task force. We've been in a task force from the very beginning. This event happened in Carroll County, of course, but we've been unified since the very beginning, and we'll maintain that.
FBI, too? Are they still involved?
FBI and all federal agencies will continue to be available to us.
How many, and over these past 5.5 years, where I was trying to find out overall how many tips before today had come in? Was it like tens of thousands? Or
70,000-ish. I should have gotten that this morning. I've said that a couple different times, but I think we're somewhere around 70,000 or just above that.
How about the reward? What was that up to?
Yeah, I think it was 340 or 350,000, I think, and we'll work through all those details as time goes on.
And to have come to Mr. Allen, is anyone in line to get any of that reward? Is there?
We're going to continue to work through those details.
Okay, so in other words, you can't say. Anything else that you want to add? I was reading last night in an interview, you said, this is the first time in a case that you could recall that you had audio, video of the person you thought was responsible. Do you think Mr. Allen is the man on that bridge?
The judge signed a probable cause affidavit for the arrest of him. I can't wait to tell the story, but today's not the day.
Again, choosing to say today is not the day deliberately, instead of just saying, I can't talk about it, like he's done in other instances.
When do you think you can tell that story?
We're going to let the courts decide.
In other words, let them decide when they can release that PC.
Well, and then remember, even then, when the PC is released, due process is still a piece of all this puzzle. And this isn't over until it's over. And that's where the conviction of him.
You said when I interviewed at the 5-year anniversary, when we finally charge someone, that's when the real work is going to begin. That basically you have to start all over, essentially?
That's what they'll do. I can't think of a case in my lifetime in a long, long career that had that much information, that much data associated with one case. So the right thing to do is to go back to every one of them.
And do you go back through all the tips you've gotten?
Exactly what they'll do.
Every single one since day one?
Yeah.
And maybe you already answered this. Do we know if you ever interviewed Mr. Allen in the past?
I'm not going to talk about Mr. Allen.
Okay. We've gotten several calls this week, since this broke, that, hey, what about the little girls in Flora? Are you still working on that case?
You know, I wasn't going to say this today, and I've said it to a couple of networks, but when I took the long way here today, I stopped in Flora. And there's a gravel lot across from that house where those 4 little girls died. And I said to myself, I hope that one day we're doing the same thing for them. Still alive and well.
Anything else you want to add?
I'm tired.
What's your expression, your thoughts to this community, the people that are out walking the street? They're just going, man, finally, something.
No, I love that question, and I'm just going to make some assumptions, but I hope that they're not on edge anymore. I hope they don't have to looking around anymore, that they're afraid of going out to the High Bridge or to a park or getting on their bikes and taking off down the street or an alley or whatever that might be. No, give it to us. Give it to us. And we've been encouraging that, but it would be probably very unlikely for them just to say, okay, the sheriff's office and the city PD and the state police have this. We're not going to worry about it anymore. That's not what I'm asking them to do. But maybe today is that first step towards that next place of peace for them too, and I hope so.
It really changed the community.
It did. It did. Yeah. And this is, I think, one of the reasons it has such a global interest is because this is every small town in America.
It has a global interest because it's every small town in America. I mean, some people might think I'm nitpicking here, but come on. Do random villages in Africa with no internet, are they really following this case? Or in the jungles of Southeast Asia, like Papua New Guinea, some of those places, or the mountains of China or Mongolia, or some remote villages in Siberia, or in the Amazon rainforest. I mean, are those people really following the case and interest there? Not that they wouldn't care or anything like that. I think any human being would care, but I'm not sure I would use the word global and planet, every other paragraph when talking about this case. And is there a tell there for Carter? I mean, I don't know. I'm not saying it means anything. I'm just saying we don't really see that with other cases, especially small town murders.
Yeah, and that's true. So we've tried to always remember that and talk about that and not forget the value of this work, no matter what color the shirt you're wearing. Yeah.
So let's look at one more interview of Doug Carter with more context here. This was posted November 2nd, Fox 59 News. I don't know when this was recorded, somewhere around there, but after the press conference, so more recent. And there's an interesting clip here on the 1-year anniversary regarding, again, the language of today is the day and whether or not it refers to the actual arrest or the day in court where the guilty party would be found guilty.
If you're watching this and you're responsible, today may be your day. It might be tomorrow, but I can guarantee you your day's coming.
Those words on the 1-year anniversary of the murders of Abigail Williams and Liberty German, they gave us all chills.
So again, clearly he's talking about the arrest being made. So then he states, okay, today or the previous Friday before the Halloween press conference, that was the day of the arrest. But then he goes on to say today is not that day 1,000,000 times. Why would he constantly use that phrasing instead of just saying, oh, well, I can't talk about the evidence right now? He chooses to use the words, today is not that day. Today is not the day. After only saying today is the day or today was the day one time at the beginning of the press conference, he only said it once after all those years, and then he proceeded to say today is not that day multiple times. What does that mean? I mean, it's just the phrasing is really interesting. It's as if there are multiple parties involved, so in the back of his mind, he knows it's not really the day. I mean, would that explain why he constantly wanted to say today's not that day a whole bunch more times?
Indiana State Police Superintendent Doug Carter speaking directly to the murderer he believed could even be watching that very news conference 4 years ago. Now, that man arrested, Richard Allen, accused of killing the 2 8th-grade girls. He was living in Delphi before, during, and after that day. Superintendent Carter here now on the red couch. I want to start with taking us to the day when you knew you had the evidence and you could actually not announce it, but that you could make the arrest.
So clearly the day is referring to the arrest, not being found guilty in court.
What was that day like?
First, thank you for welcoming me here. It was surreal, and I was not for us. I was so excited about the family, to be able to talk with the family and to the community, and maybe maybe now this is going to start that process of healing. That would be my hope.
Yeah. Congratulations. I knew that, many of us thought that you would retire, at a certain time, and then we knew that you probably wouldn't because of how important this case was. I mean, every case is important.
It is.
And I know that because I know you. But can you dive into that? This community was rocked. The country was in a different way, perhaps, because of the innocence of two 8th graders.
I've said all along, it's every town USA.
Yeah.
And I think that's the dynamic of how this has grown and how it's gained such momentum, Angela. But to see it now and to see maybe that community that's become so special to me and to all of us, start that process of getting back to some semblance of normalcy.
Okay, so again, very choice words, starting the process, not getting to just the beginning of the process. It's as if, again, he's just being so measured, as if he knows there's multiple people responsible. Again, maybe there are, maybe there aren't. Maybe Richard Allen is the right guy. Maybe he's not. Again, this is MINDSHOCK. I'm not alleging anything is true or untrue. We're just examining all available information logically.
It warmed my heart, quite frankly.
You work so closely with your team, all of the state troopers, the detectives, the prosecutor's office, the U.S. Marshals, the Sheriff's Department. When it came to saying, okay, now we have this, we know this is going to get out, how do we do it? And we are only going to say his name, and we're going to give the mugshot. Right. How does that discussion look? Is it an easy discussion? Do you debate it? How does that even come together?
Well, the debate's good for everything,
Absolutely.
right? So there certainly was a lot of debate with strategy throughout this entire process. But I felt enormous responsibility, but not near the responsibility that those frontline detectives felt. So my job was to support them in everything that they did, not question them, but to support them. And I hope that I did that. I know I did it to the best of my ability. The strategy with release, we've always realized the best way through trouble is right up the middle. So we're going to do what we always think is right. Not necessarily what people want to hear, but we're going to do what we believe is right. And gosh, we look back on our whole lifetime and we have, dang, I wish I'd have done that differently, but I don't think I was doing it knowing it was wrong. So that's what we did.
Probable cause. This has become, wow, this really blew up actually on my Facebook page. I was surprised that I have like 1,000 people and about half of them are angry. It is very rare that a probable cause would be sealed and we wouldn't have even something that showed a little information, redacted everything, but something just said, we have evidence here, here's how this looks. To have it all under seal, very rare. I'm actually a little surprised that people were upset at us that we would at least request that the judge look at it and say, okay, is this really how this should be and it should be under seal? You understand that that is our job and you would, I'm guessing, expect us to request that.
I would and I do. I think that you guys do a really good job of maintaining that stability in the middle someplace.
Yeah.
And this is rather unusual.
Yeah.
But it's not going to be forever.
Yeah.
This is very complex, and just since less than 48 hours ago, we have over 200 new additional tips. So we've still got a lot of work to do.
So again, constantly referring to the case as complex. I mean, how many single perpetrator cases are that complex, particularly when you have audio and video? So what is he referring to specifically when he's talking about complex? And what is he trying to say regarding these extra 200 tips after the arrest? Are those in corroboration of evidence pointing against Richard Allen? Or is it evidence in the direction of other people, some believing Richard Allen is either not the guy or not the sole guy?
But I'm proud of where we are.
Can you characterize any of those tips? If you could say, well, just kind of what we have gotten, or like, whoa, we've gotten something. I mean, I know you can't talk specifics.
No,
but-
I'll say that. I'll say to you, to everybody watching this morning, every one of those matter. Every single one of them matters. So if you think it's a little bit unusual, tell us. Let us figure that out. Now, we're not always going to tell you what we know until the time is right. We'll never tell you what we think. So that's kind of where this is right now.
Well, you know, I mean, I want to ask you 1,000 questions, but I know that we have we have a relationship, and I know not to step over that because I do respect you. I trust you. I know you've worked hard. You were a man of character. When you said we have an arrest, we will let everyone know. You were a man of your integrity. You gave us that, and we appreciate that, and we've always enjoyed working with you. And we congratulate you.
Well, and I the congratulations are, kind of a side note to all this.
But it's important.
It is. I appreciate that. It really goes to the people that have done all this work. It's been just an amazing experience of humility and of partnerships with the Sheriff's Office and the City PD and all of our federal partnerships. And that's cliche sometimes, but it's so real now. It's so real now, and we're not done yet.
No, and especially when you look at, I mean, it's my daughters they would have been my daughter's age. They should be in college, and it's disgusting. And it's sad. So I think for us to be able to, as a community, be able to say that hopefully someone will be held accountable is important. So thank you.
Sure is.
We are going to take a break and we'll be right back.
So yeah, not a lot of info, but interesting. Very interesting regarding today's the day. Today is not the day. I mean, just the language utilized there.